guys, in this video I want to show you how to get set up with Vienna Ensemble Pro and have it ready to be used with OTR2 and the Bome MIDI translator setup. So to do so, this is the approach that I took. And I want to say if you do it right from the beginning, it's the least amount of work you're going to have to do. That means setting up everything with a disabled template in mind, even if you're not going to use it. Because you may want to do that down the line and take advantage of the features in OTR. Previously, it was a lot more difficult to try to set things up that way, mostly because there is a gap in communication between the DAW and Vienna Ensemble Pro. You get some things that get sent back and forth, but not everything that's needed. So workflow improvements have been made with Bome and OTR2, which make this an ideal setup. So this is the way that I would get going in the very beginning. I have my projects set up in a way where it is one instrument per instance. Now, each instrument could have multiple articulations. So I may have violins in one instance, and then within that particular instance, that, for example, if it were loaded in Contact, I would have all the different articulations available. So my goal is one track from OTR to connect to one instance in Vienna Ensemble Pro, and then I can enable or disable the Vienna Ensemble Pro instance as needed, and it will disable all the articulations within that instrument. So that's the pretty straightforward way to do this. The way that I got set up in the beginning is that I worked in server projects. I wanted to work in small bites of information. So what I would do is I would say, okay, I want to take a library and I want to set up a server project for it, knowing that it's a piece of a bigger project. So just keep that in mind. And what I would do is I would come in here and I'd say, okay, which library do we want to set up? Arva. Okay, so Arva has a variety of patches. We have some sopranos, some altos, for boys and girls. So knowing the way that I'm setting this up, that means that I really want to have alto boys and soprano boys on separate instances, alto girls and soprano girls on separate instances. So let's go ahead and I would immediately, 3, 4, set those guys up. And I would come over here and I'd go Arva, boys, alto. And I'd copy that and I'd paste this. I mean, truth be told, I would put soprano on top just because I'm kind of anal about making sure I have everything set up the way a score would. But we're going to do girls and then girls, soprano. So those are backwards. It's going to annoy me during this tutorial, but that's okay. All right, so I'd set each of those up, and then I'd come over to my MIDI controllers for each instance, and I want to make sure these are set up appropriately from the beginning. So I'm going to go up to Instance, and I'm going to open a project. I'm going to navigate over. I'm going to my recent projects just because I've opened it numerous times. But you're going to go to the OTR2 folder, the extras folder inside of it, and get the disabled template blank CC118. And when you do so, it's going to basically bring in all of the CC mappings for disabling the instance. We want to do this before we add your instruments, because otherwise it's just going to delete out anything that you've done. We're going to do the same thing. Open it up. Open it up. Open it up. Okay, so now we have all that there. And then what I do is I go ahead and I create one channel. I try not to do any other channels, just one. And then I'm going to load in this case, Contact. And then I'm going to make sure, well, the other thing I do is I turn off the effects. I turn off the stereo pan. There's no reason for it. I do everything in the DAW. Basically, Vienna Ensemble Pro is a dummy system that holds my samples and sends them back to my DAW as if they were hosted there. So I'm going to click back on Contact, and I'm going to navigate to Arva. And then this is the boys alto patch. So I'm going to bring that one in. Whoops, I brought in the same one twice. So bring that over. Let's close it out. Okay. So I have both of these instances loaded up. That is, oh, truth be told, that was under the bonus patches. So we actually have some more stuff in here. We've got the performance. We've got this regular patch. And what else do we have? Boyd's altos. Yeah, that's what we just added. And we may or may not have something in the performance. It's okay. And then we've got this legato patch, and we've got this guy, another one here, and another one here. Okay. So that brings in all the possible combinations of patches. I'm going to go through here and make sure I map all of my MIDI CCs where they need to be, make sure all my automation's set up, and then I'm going to make sure I build up a rearticulate template for it. But for now, step one, do this, get all the articulations loaded in the way that I know that I'm going to use them. I'm going to do this for soprano, alto, for the girls, soprano and alto as well. Okay. From here, I'm going to go ahead and load up the server project with everybody mapped. Show you what it looks like. So once finished, the final server project looks like this. I ended up with soprano boys, alto boys, soprano solo boy, alto solo boy, and the same for the girls. So I wound up with 8 patches, or 8 instances. Each of the instances, like we were looking at earlier, has, the automation set up for each one. I have gone ahead and set up all of the CCs. I have set up, for example, CC 22 on my close mic, 23 on my Deca, 24 on my hall mic. I have CCs 76 controlling the legato button. I didn't do anything for CC for the releases. CC 77 for overlap. I turned reverb off on everything. I basically got these ready to be set up with rearticulate. From here, what I did, let me merge this back in. There we go. From here, what I did is I set up a project that mirrored this setup within OTR. So I'm going to just come back over to where we were. I guess I can load up a blank project tab. It's going to be okay. I'm going to right click, insert tracks from templates. I've already set this up, so I'm not going to duplicate it right now. What I did originally do was I went to virtual instruments, rearticulate, Vienna Ensemble Pro, and I would choose an instrument. And I would map this out exactly like we just did. Arva boys, alto. Duplicate these guys out, and we're going to have soprano, alto, solo soprano, solo alto. All right, delete those guys out. We're going to duplicate these one more time. And we're going to call this the girls tracks. Boom. Girls, 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 girls. And then I'm going to insert one more track. I'm going to go to the group tracks, the sample library folder, move this guy up here, these guys up in here. We're going to call this Arva. Nice. So now we have a setup of how we want this to be connected. They're not connected yet, but we do have the Vienna Ensemble Pro preloaded, Rearticulate preloaded. what we're going to then do is begin our rearticulate maps. That would be the next step. I'd go ahead and save this as a track template that I'm working on. And what it's eventually going to lead us to is a track template. Let me pull up my final template. So if I go to my master, acquire vocals, I go to Arva, and now keep in mind I've set up all of these different server instances and everything basically set up right now. I'm going to do the disconnected. I'm going to select that. And here is what my instance looks like. For me, it looks very similar to what I was actually just kind of going through on the fly. I also, in my personal template, have nomenclature for if I have mapped all the mics, if they have one mic, if that's a close mic, I make sure I notate that on the track templates. I also include warm-up CC information. So this is kind of to reset the instance. And if we look at the actual grid, you'll see that my warm-up sets, CCs, all the ones that I use or potentially map, they all have startup values, right? So they're all there. And at this point in time, I've already created the rearticulate maps. So for example, Arva Sopranos has been mapped out with all of these guys. Alto has been set up. So you have all these different potentials. And if I connect the server, so I'm going to connect the girl soprano. I'm going to make sure that I leave decoupled and preserved on. And we are connecting the girl soprano. Going to click on it, click connect. And what you will see, we're going to just load up the warm-up side of it. All the articulations are set up. Now you may be saying, what does the articulation map look like? And so the articulation maps, they all are really close for each of the Strazov instruments, actually. I'd set up one and then I'd kind of duplicate it over. So let me scroll through this real quick and we'll find Arva. And then this is the girl soprano. So this is what it looks like. So I've got basically 35 articulations spread out over 7 MIDI channels. I have different rules in place. Like I said in one of the earlier videos, I use 76, 77, CC 76, 77, 78, and 79 for my own internal use. In particular, I made a mention earlier that I set up the legato CC as 76 and the overlap as 77. So this gave me some control within one particular instance here and one particular MIDI channel of controlling multiple variations of it. So basically I loaded up each potential articulation and then what I can do within it. So this is a little bit of an advanced setup, but you can see that if I hit legato 76 was the legato button. So it's going to trigger legato on, overlap off. Legato chordal triggers legato on, overlap on. Sustain turns legato off and keeps the overlap on. And it goes on. So you can kind of see how all of this kind of works together. I go through, if I were setting up a new template, like say I had set up the articulation for the girls, what I would do for the boys is I would go to the new from template, and then I would select the Arva template that I had set up. I'm trying to find it real quick. And then basically now most of the articulations are mapped one-to-one across all of their libraries. So it's going to look really close. And I would keep this mapped out. And then I would just save this because this is a new from template, right? New from existing. So basically I would call this one Arva, whatever the new one was, like the boys version. Okay. So that shows you how I get Rearticulate set up. The other important things that I do on setting up the Vienna Ensemble Pro instance, and this is going to save you in the long run, step one, I make sure that within each instance, I save the multi. So I go in, I save the multi and place it in, I have a folder structure that I use. So within, for example, let me make this bigger. Within Arva, I have a folder where I save the actual server project. I have a place where I save each multi and where I save each instance. Now, this is going to be for future purposes, but for now, basically this helps me keep some continuity. So I'm going to go in and make sure I save this. After that, I make sure I go into the instance and I save the project as, not save project, but save project as. And I do that for each of these guys. And at the end of it, I go in and make sure that I go to File and then Save Server Project As. And then that will allow me on having a full server project like I just opened up for Arva. It allows me to have each of the instances saved, each of the contact multis saved. You may be saying, why do I care about the contact multis? Well, say, for example, you did not want to use Vienna Ensemble Pro down the line, and you just wanted to have a track with contact on it, right? So we're going to bring it down here. We're going to call it just a tester. And let's say we wanted to load up Arva. We would normally have to come down here and then set everything up like normal. But if we actually come up here and go to load, and we can navigate our way in our mapped projects to Strazov Arva, the multis, and let's load up the one that we wanted. And now everything is already mapped out, which is really cool because if we decide to make this a Rearticulate track, we're going to click Add Rearticulate. And now we're going to come over here and we're going to choose the articulate notation. So this was boys altos. And now everything is going to trigger exactly as we expect it. So it allows us to kind of move between Vienna Ensemble Pro and other places. I mean, there is definitely a good reason to have all that saved along the way. Okay. So we're getting close. We now have set all the instruments up. I make sure that the first thing that I do is with my project that I'm working on, I make sure I save a disconnected version of this. That way I can bring this in very simply like I did earlier and then connect the instance as I see fit. This is great for track templates. So what we want to do is make sure all of these guys are disconnected. And then once they're all disconnected, I like to close this out. I keep the general VE icon, all the plugins active. We have our Rearticulate instance loaded up. We have our track warmups loaded up, and I'm going to save this track as a template. Then I'm going to come back. And after it's been saved once, I'm going to go back and I'm going to connect each instance. So girls, sopranos, girls, altos. And so on. And then, now that they're connected, I'm going to make sure that I assign these the correct server. So say these are on server 7, right? I'm going to make sure they're all set up right. And then I'm going to come back and I'm going to save this as a track template where it's already connected. And again, I'm going to make sure I do everything in a preserved and decoupled setup. That means that the Vienna Ensemble Pro instances are always there. I don't want to override them. I don't want to save them in this project. I want very little information in this project. I just want it to point to the Vienna Ensemble Pro server, and then the MIDI information in the files serve as a way to reset the instance and for me to play it. So anyway, once it's saved, you're going to get something that looks like this. So inside of each template, the way I have organized mine is based off of the actual template itself. So if I click over here, my categories that I have set up, you'll see I've got orchestral strings, solo strings, winds. So I have my particular setup. This whole project that you're looking at contains all of the disconnected instances. I have one project that has all the instances disconnected, but then I go in and I make sure that I save each setup disconnected, right? And then once they're all saved, you're going to wind up, like I said, with a folder structure, for me at least, that looks something like this. I save them in the folder where they're going to be. And then within that, I have a disconnected server or a disconnected folder, and I have a connected folder. My nomenclature for this is Vienna Ensemble Server 1, preserved decoupled, disabled in OTR, or deactivated. I use activated and deactivated within OTR, and disabled, enabled, even though they mean the same thing. I think of them differently for the Vienna Ensemble side of things. So this is preserved, decoupled, disabled or deactivated in OTR, and enabled on Vienna Ensemble Pro Server. This one is Vienna Ensemble 1, preserved, decoupled, activated, and enabled. This is my default setup, and I would click that. Now, if I click the ones that are active and connected, I need to make sure the Vienna Ensemble instance is already loaded. If it's not loaded, it's not going to be connected properly. So the step here is make sure your Vienna Ensemble server is loaded up completely, and then click on the connected one. Don't do connected first. You can do disconnected and then connect them after you load it up, but the connected is already after it's been set up. So I've got, like I said, all my libraries mapped over here, or at least I say all my libraries, all the main ones that I use, which is quite a bit actually. And from here, the only other thing that I would tell you is after you get everything set up, you're going to come back over to Vienna Ensemble, and let's close it out completely. It's going to disconnect everything. We don't want to save anything right now. And then the last thing I do is I create one full server project. And the full server project, when I load up Vienna Ensemble, what I'm going to do is say, okay, here's what I want on this particular server. And I'm going to go up to File, and I am going to import instances from server project. And I'm going to pick the different instances. So say I want some age grand ensemble instruments here. Say I wanted these, right? I'm going to click OK. It may take a minute, but it's going to load up all of these instances. And then I'm going to load up another one that is say we wanted East West Voices of Soul. I only had one in there, but that's okay. Just for the sake of it, Word Builder tracks I have hosted locally. That way, because you're going to be building custom Word Builder projects at that time. So anyway, this is East West. Then we can load in, let's just do one more for the sake of this example. I don't know. Sure, Mallet Flux. I'm a little disappointed right now because I just saw that I have a typo in this, and that means I've got that already set up. You've got to keep your instance name set up all the time. So I'm going to have to go back and resave some things in my configuration, but I'm glad I caught that now. So we load all of that up. And then after all is said and done, I will save this entire server project as something like server project for server one. All right. So anyway, that's long-winded. I apologize for how long this was taking, but this kind of tells you how to get your server set up. So it's basically server project for a library. Inside of that, you're going to load up the open up each instance with the disabled template pre-configured. Go ahead and load everything, set up your articulation maps, save your track templates, and eventually you get to here. So hope that makes sense. Let me know if you have any questions. Thanks for watching.